guys, welcome to Gen Z Codes. This is the first tutorial for HTML. In this video, we're just going to learn the basics about HTML coding, and actually we're going to understand what HTML actually is. So first, let's get started with understanding what HTML is. So, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's a standard markup language for creating web pages. Now, what HTML does is it actually describes the structure of a web page, and it consists of a series of elements that we can actually use to tell the browser how to display the content. So, on any web page, whatever content you see, that all of that actually has to be programmed. It actually has to be coded using the HTML language on a specific document. If it is not coded on a specific document, it is not going to be displayed on your web page. Not only displayed, but if you have a button and you actually want to animate that, or if you want to add some animations or some patterns or a different background or whatever you want to add, that kind of animates your web page. If you don't add the coding for that on your HTML document, it will not happen on your actual web page. So just remember this, that whatever you actually code onto your HTML document, that is the only thing that is actually going to be displayed onto your web page. Alright, so now that we know what HTML is, let's discuss something a bit different, right? Let's discuss the software that you can actually use for HTML coding. So web pages can be created and modified by using professional HTML editors, and this includes things like Adobe Dreamweaver. Some people even use Sublime Text and a lot of other things, right? But actually, if you just want to learn HTML, I would really suggest to you to just use a simple text editor like Notepad on PCs or TextEdit, which is available on Macs, right? I think that a simple text editor is a good way to learn HTML, so it's much easier than the other softwares as well to understand. Alright, so if you need any assistance or guidance with opening it and kind of learning how to actually use TextEdit or Notepad, I've linked a presentation in the description below, so you can go ahead and check that out, and all the steps are just written there, and you can read them and kind of understand how both those softwares work. Alright, so now that we have that covered, I want to talk about the different HTML elements. So actually, what is going on over here, that's what we're going to learn now. So an HTML element is actually defined by a start tag, some content, and then you have an end tag, right? So as you can see over here, we have a start tag for all of these, and we have an end tag for all of these, right? Except this one, which I will explain to you why we don't have one for this a bit later, right? But for the rest of them, we always have start tags and end tags, right? So as you can see over here, we have a start tag for HTML, we have an end tag for HTML, we have a start tag for the head, we have an end tag for the head, right? And then same for body, H1, P, and even title, right? So basically, the end tag and the start tag are very similar, but what they basically indicate is that where this part of your web page is starting and where it's ending, right? And basically it's, even in code, it looks very similar. The only thing that you're adding to an end tag is this little backslash over here that we have, right? That's the only thing that we're going to be adding. Alright, so between each of these, between the start tag and the end tag, we will always have some content, right? If you leave it empty, then there's probably no point of even adding that. But things like body, head, those are usually pretty important. You usually need them you always need them in any HTML document that you create, because you need them for absolutely every single web page if you want it to be a successful one. Alright, so now let's talk about the actual elements that we see over here, right? So the first one that we have is doctype HTML. So this declaration actually defines that this document is an HTML5 document. So the HTML5 is actually a version of HTML. So HTML as a language has many different versions, right? So we are going to be using the HTML5 version. And so what this doctype HTML does is it kind of defines that we're using this language specifically, right? So that basically what it says is that I am going to be using, it tells the browser that I am using HTML5, so accordingly understand this. It's kind of like, imagine if I'm talking to you in a language, right? And you wouldn't know what that language is, right? So I specify to you, okay, I'm talking in this language, right? You tell them I'm talking to you in this language, and then you're like, oh, okay. So you understand then basically how to understand me almost. I know it's a pretty confusing example, but basically what it does is it tells the browser that this is the language that I'm using, so interpret the code in this particular way, right? Now the next element that we have, the next tag that we have rather, is HTML. So this is the root element of an HTML page. It's used in practically every single one, and you have to have this. You have to have both of these lines, actually almost all of them, but you must have these two tags in absolutely any HTML document that you use. Alright. The next one that we have is the head element. So this contains meta information about the HTML page. Now, basically, what the head has, it's basically usually things that aren't actually going to be displayed onto the web page, but that are like other sorts of information, right? You'll understand this a little bit better when we learn about other elements that we actually use in the head, and you'll probably understand what I mean by meta information a bit later. But just know that for now, in the head, you will always have the title element. And what this title element is, let's come to that now, is it actually specifies a title for the HTML page. Now this is not the heading, this is not a particular text that is going to be displayed onto the web page, but it's basically a title that is shown in the browser's title bar or in the Pages tab. So if you open up any web page right now, right, and you look at what the tab says, like let's say you open up multiple tabs or something, and then you obviously have a title at the top which says the web page's name, right? That is what your title is going to be for the entire website, and you can choose absolutely any title that you actually want it to be. It could be anything according to your choice, but you must have a title, right? And like I said, it's not going to be displayed onto the web page, but it's going to be in the tab part, or it's going to be in the browser's title bar. Alright, now the next thing that we have is the body element. So what this does is it basically defines the document's body. So it's a container for all the visible contents, right? So things like headings, paragraphs, images, hyperlinks, tables, lists, all those sorts of things that are actually that you can actually see on the web page. So it's the elements that will actually be displayed onto the web page, right? Now the next one that we have is H1. So the H1 element defines a large heading. Now we'll discuss headings a bit later, along with the next one, which is paragraphs. And I'll explain to you about that. I'll talk to you about that in a little bit more depth. But for now, just know that it's a large heading that's going to be displayed using this H1 tag. And then the next one that we have is, like I already said, it's a paragraph, right? It's just very simply just a paragraph. The difference between the heading and the paragraph is, of course, is the way that it looks, the way that it's formatted, right? The heading, H1, is usually in a pretty bold text, and it's also pretty large. In comparison to that, paragraph text is usually pretty small, and it's not in bold unless you want it to be, which you can do with other codes that will make it bold. But yeah, usually that's the difference between a heading and a paragraph, that one just looks more like a heading, as you would say. Alright, so now that we've gotten that done, let's talk about another simple concept, and this is nested HTML elements. Now, HTML elements can be nested. What this means is that elements can contain other elements. So, very simply, as you can see over here, this body thing is an element, right? But it contains two other elements, which are H1 and P, right? The heading and the paragraph. This is completely normal. There's a lot of times, actually almost every single time, you'll see that there will be a nested element in your HTML document, right? So all HTML documents consist of nested HTML elements. And so here you can have as many nested elements as you want, right? Even in the heading, the head over here, you can have absolutely as many nested elements as you want, as long as those elements fit into the head part of your document. And even over here, you can have as many nested elements as you want, which means that you can have as many headings as you want, as many paragraphs, as many links, images, lists, whatever. You can have as many of them as you want, and you would all put them in the body sort of thing. Alright, well, now that we've I think we've covered almost everything in Elements, I just want to talk to you guys about two more things, right? And these are HTML headings and paragraph. So very simply, HTML headings are titles or subtitles that you want to display on a web page. Now, as you can see over here, it says H1, right? It doesn't just say H. Now, the reason for this number over here is that you can have multiple headings, right? So, multiple different types of headings, rather. So, you can have H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, and H6, right? And each time, it will become smaller. So, H1 on the web page would probably be the largest. H2 would be a little bit smaller than H1, but it would still definitely be much bigger than the paragraph. Then you have H3, which is again a bit smaller, so this is kind of like a subtitle sort of thing. H4, which is even smaller than H3, but again it's still heading. Then you have H5 and H6, and both of them again smaller than the others, right? And that's kind of why we have these numbers, so that we can have different sizes, and so each each following or each ascending, when you say it in ascending order, each following heading will have a different emphasis, and the emphasis on each of the headings will decrease as the number increases. So H2 will have less emphasis than H1, and H3 will have less emphasis on H2, right? That's just how this number system works. But don't worry, you can definitely have a lot of H1s. If you want to have like 20, go ahead, have 20 H1s. You can have 20 H2s. You can have a mix of them. It's completely up to you. That doesn't really matter. You can have as many H1s as you want, as many H2s, as many H3s, even have a mix of them. Go ahead, right? Okay, now let's talk about something else. So again, just about headings though. So why are headings important? Now, search engines use these headings that you make to index the structure and content of your web pages. Now, what users often do is users skim a page by its headings. Now, you may often notice that basically when you search up something on the internet, right? Let's say you search some article, right? And you type it by its title, right? The title of the article is what you type into your into Google, and you get a bunch of results, right? And those results are actually based on the headings. They're usually based on the headings, right? So when you search up the name of an article, when you search up the title of an article, the first result would probably be one whose heading precisely matches or is very similar to whatever you search up on Google, right? And that's why headings are so important, because you need them for your search engine to actually understand the user's search result. It'll usually match your search result with the heading. And sometimes it even uses the paragraph, but it will always look for the heading first, and it'll try to match it up with that. So it's important that you have a heading and it's related to what your entire web page is going to be about, right? And it's important to use headings to also show the document structure. Alright, so now let's move on and let's talk about paragraphs, right? So as I said, the HTML over here that we've seen, that element defines a paragraph. Now a paragraph will always start on a new line, and browsers automatically add some white space, like a margin, before and after a different paragraph, right? And it's usually like a block of text that you do, and it usually has a large chunk, but you could also have like 2 lines, whatever, it's fine. It's just a paragraph. Like, simply put, it's a paragraph. It's very literally just a paragraph, right? Now, the next thing that we have is HTML display. So you cannot be sure how HTML will be displayed. So large or small screens and resized windows will create different results. So with HTML, you cannot change the display by adding extra spaces or extra lines in your HTML codes, right? So let's say you have like a lot of lines, right? You can't just simply say like, let's say, I don't know, the first paragraph, the second paragraph, yeah, and then you have like the third, right? And then you have like fourth and something like that, right? Putting lines over here, like between these different lines, it does not mean that when your web page is actually going to be displayed, that there are going to be lines between these paragraphs. No, that is not guaranteed, and that is not even going to happen, right? In order to do this, there are a lot of different codes which you'll learn about later, but this is an important thing that you must remember, that when you're writing a paragraph, the gaps between these lines and these new lines that you've started over here really do not matter. This is not how it will actually look on like on the web page, because if you put it like this, it's not going to be displayed like this. It will simply be displayed just like this, right? The new lines that you put over here really do not matter, right? Alright, so now I want to talk to you about horizontal rules. So the HR tag, which is basically like this. Let me show you an example. So you could have something like HR, right? And then you have maybe like H2, and you can say this is a heading, right? And I can just close that, right? So the HR element is used to separate content or define a change in an HTML page. So it defines a thematic break in an HTML page and is most often displayed as like a horizontal rule. The HR tag is an empty tag, which means that it has no end tag, right? Now, besides this, we also have another thing, right, which are line breaks. Now, like we said, you can't actually have, like, if you put this separately, like if you put it on different lines, it's not actually going to be displayed like that, right? So how do we do line breaks? There's this thing called BR, right? That just signifies a line break. So use this if you want a line break, so like a new line, without starting a new paragraph, right? So let's say between, I'm just going to delete this for now. So let's say between the paragraph and the second heading, you wanted a line, or actually wait, no, let's put this over here rather. So yeah, let's put this over here, right? Let's say between the first paragraph and the second paragraph, or the second line, maybe I'll just put it. Yeah, so between the first paragraph and the second line, you wanted a line break. Then you could just put this without actually having to start a new paragraph, right? So this would just be, it would start on a new line, and it would just be a line break. Alright, now the next thing, or actually the last thing that I want to discuss, is the poem problem, right? So usually what we do is that we have something, like if we have a poem, we usually like put a lot of line breaks in the middle, and we would exactly probably like write it like this, right? We'd say second line, fourth, right? That's my poem, or something like that, right? So there is a solution to this, and this is called the pre-element, right? So it defines a pre-formatted text. So the text inside a pre-element is displayed in a fixed width font, and it preserves both spaces and line breaks. So with the paragraph format over here, it would simply be like displayed in just a single line. But if I use a pre like that, right, it would be displayed exactly how it is right now, right? With these line breaks with a fixed width, and it preserves both spaces and line breaks. Alright, so the last thing I actually want to show you is how to save an HTML document, and actually how to open it up on Safari or another basically browser, right? So basically what you want to do is, first of all, I'm just going to say Command S, which is going to be save, or you probably have like file up or something and you just save the document, right? So you click on save over here, right? And I can just drag that over here, right? So over here you get a variety of options. I'm going to save it onto my desktop, and I'm going to call it introduction, right? Make sure that the end tag over here is HTML. So that ensures that your document now is going to be saved, it's going to be stored as an HTML file, right? And then what you want to go ahead and do is you just want to go ahead and click save, right? So I'm just going to drag there. You're going to go ahead and click save. All right, so now my file has been saved as introduction.html. Now what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to open a new tab. I'm going to open my Safari, my Google, and let's just bring that into frame here. Right, so now what I want to do on Safari is I kind of want to go to, I'm going to go to File, right? And I don't know if you can see this, but what I want to say is I want to say Open File, right? You probably can't see it, but once you go to File on a Mac at least, you'll get the option of saying Open File. So you have to click on that. And over here, as you can see, I got desktop, right? So I'm just going to scroll down. And look, so the introduction.html file is there. I'm going to click on open. Let's just click on open. And here we go, right? We got the base, we got how it kind of works, right? So the first thing that I have is my first heading. Then I have the pre over here that we had defined, and that's kind of how my poem looks, right? So I have the first paragraph, the second line, fourth, and then I have H2, which is, this is the heading, right? Now look at this again, you probably see that H2 is definitely smaller than H1 over here, and that's really important to remember, right? Now, another thing that you'll notice is that right over here, like, remember over here we had said title is the title of the page. So as you can see over here, the title is title of the page. It's displayed over here in the tab section, right? And that's how your title will be displayed. As you can see over here, you get Google, right? Because that's the name, that's a title that Google has given to their web page. So it displays Google. Over here it says title of the page, right? So this is, again, very simple web page. Probably won't be able to actually use it as a website, but as we go on, as we create more, as we learn more, we'll be able to create more complex and more advanced web pages, and later on, hopefully, we'll be able to create almost professional web pages.
Ideally, you've gotten a fundamental understanding of HTML and what it means to create a web page now, and we'll definitely learn more through future videos. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, happy coding!